Podcast. Today we've come to talk about something that is not easily discussed. However, it's something big that's happening within our communities, within our world during this unfortunate time. And that topic is grief, dealing with grief. Everyone is to some extent dealing with grief, whether it be due to the current coronavirus pandemic, the loss of a loved one, police brutality. There's so much going on in our world where it's put everyone in a position to have to deal with it to some extent. And unfortunately, there are so many that aren't dealing with grief well. Um, as defined in a dictionary, grief is simply deep sorrow, especially that caused by someone's death. We have this standard in society that grief is supposed to be handled in such a way, or we're supposed to heal with time, or we're supposed to get over it. But that's not necessarily that's not necessarily the norm. That's not how it always happens. So today we're going to talk to you about grief from our standpoint, and really losing a loved one, someone close to us, and how we've dealt with it, how we intertwine with our families, how we interact, and how it impacts us even after years have passed. I'll pass the mic on for now. Come back to me. So anybody else that wants to get started, I have David, and Andrea with me, my usual suspects. And
I will take a stab at it.
Cool. I will pass the ball to David.
Hi, everybody. So you may tell I'm one of the older members of the team. So unfortunately, being around a long time means you have experienced quite a bit of grief. You've had people pass away, loved ones pass away. So let me give my story. And I didn't bring any tissue, but I'm hoping my team members brought tissue. And I think when you hear my story, you will grab the tissue. One day, it was almost 20 years ago. It was on my daughter's birthday, my oldest daughter, on her birthday. I am in the house. I'm watching my 3 grandchildren, my niece and my nephew, my 2 nephews and my niece and my sister-in-law get into a minivan, leaving my house to go to my daughter's house. And it was raining kind of slightly, didn't think anything of it. And my wife and I, we were waiting to go out of town that evening. So they were piling into the van, going to my daughter's house. And when they got to my daughter's house, the norm was, this was a school day, the norm was they would call us. It was a Friday, I believe, and they would call us, let us know they got there safe. Well, time kept ticking. Didn't hear from anyone. Usually it was my grandson, my oldest grandson. He would call and let us know he's arrived. And after about an hour and a half, 2 hours, I got worried because I hadn't heard from my wife either. She hadn't come home. I turned on the radio, listened to traffic and weather, just to see if anything happened that slowed them on the path. Now, the house was only about 15 or 20 miles from my house at the time. And yes, there was a traffic backup, and they reported there was an accident, and they reported 4 people died. My heart dropped. I started scrambling, trying to find out what the heck is going on. I ran out into my truck, right into a wall of cars because of that accident. What happened when they left my house, going up Pennsylvania Avenue in Upper Marlboro, Maryland, the car lost control, swerved off the road, and hit a tree. My sister-in-law, my nephew, my youngest nephew, my youngest granddaughter were killed. It wasn't 4, there were 3 that were killed, but my other 2 grandchildren experienced great trauma, broken legs, punctured ribs. My niece was badly wounded. My other nephew, broken legs. It was tremendous. So very bad accident. The bad thing, it happened on my daughter's birthday. So it's been about 20 years. How do we celebrate my daughter's birthday when that day brings about so many memories of grief? So that's my story. And as Brittany stated before, there's a lot of ways people deal with this. And I can tell you, they don't all fit. So for us, it to this day, it is still something that's not easy to do when my daughter's birthday comes around. Good thing is now, I mean, I'm an old guy, see the gray? I actually have great granddaughters. So now we focus a lot on them. My daughter is a grandmother, and so we can celebrate some of the things my knucklehead great granddaughters are doing, and not focus on the tragedy that happened that day. So for me, that's where the you have 7 stages. You have that they talk about: shock, you have denial, you have guilt, anger, depression, and acceptance. How, that all comes together at once when you have so many to pass away that way and on that particular day. And to this day, they still don't go in any order. For us, again, one thing that I do apply to this is something. There's a saying that I heard a little while ago that I didn't really acknowledge it until I thought about that's what I was doing. And that saying is, if you feed something, it will grow. So what we ended up doing as a family, we would not feed grief. We would not feed anger because we did not want that to grow. What we fed were those moments of joy, moments of remembrance, the voice of my granddaughter. I never forget my granddaughter's voice. I love her voice. It reminded me of my wife, reminded me of my mother-in-law, and the other part, the joy of my nephew that died. Every day I would come home from work because we kind of babysit. He would come and headbutt me in my stomach. So those are the moments. That's what I fed. I fed the moments of joy. Him running out of the house, headbutting me in my stomach. My other niece saying, "Dave, Uncle David, fix my bicycle." That's what I fed, and that's what grew. And to this day, those are the things we do with my great grandchildren. We feed the joy, we feed the memories, the pleasant memories. We do not feed the grief or the anger or the guilt. So that's my story. So thank you for listening.
I kind of want to piggyback off of something you just said, David. So, what I personally, with my grief, I feel like anniversaries, like the passing anniversary, is always difficult, and especially it being a birthday. But for me, the hardest ones, it's the passing. And my dad, he passed away 4 years ago, but the birthday always is kind of what I think is kind of hard for me, is because it's kind of a random day of the year to other people. Like on Father's Day, people know that's kind of a hard day because it's my dad's no longer here, but his birthday, his passing is kind of, it's February and October, nothing ties into it. So I kind of feel in a way more isolated on those days.
Mhm.
But I mean, you said this too, there's no right or wrong way to handle it. But what I try to do is something that honors him in a way. And my dad's favorite food was Lido's pizza. So on his birthday, I try to get a Lido's pizza, and little things that I kind of, if he were still here, I'd be celebrating with him. And
Mhm.
grief is one of those things people can tell you should do this, you should do that, but you find over the years too what helps you move on with it too. And I find for me, just honoring them is what gives me the most peace too. So
Mhm.
yeah.
So
That's awesome. Nito's Pizza.
Sorry, what?
no, I was gonna say, how long has it been for you, Andrea?
So my dad passed away in February of 2017 from cancer, but I kind of feel like it's one of those things. I'll go to the whole story with him. He had cancer when I was in middle school, and it was thyroid cancer. And so I was kind of always used to having a sick parent in a way. And he fought and beat the cancer that time. And so obviously I was so blessed to have him around. But then when I started at PBGC, actually a year later, so in 2016, he was diagnosed with cancer again. And it was one of those things where I kind of just deep down in my gut, I had a feeling it was just different this time around. And so it was way more aggressive. And he, I mean, he was a fighter till the end of it, but he told me, he was like, I'm going to fight this thing. And we got it. I fought it before, I'll fight it again. And I was living in Arlington, Virginia at the time. But his treatment, I don't know if anyone, I mean, I feel like cancer has been so common these days that almost everyone knows someone who's been personally impacted by it. But his treatment required him radiation twice a day, and then chemotherapy, or he's doing immunotherapy, and that was once every 2 weeks. And so he was constantly at the hospital, and he had, it was basically a surgery every 3 weeks a month. And at that point, it was just, my mom was the main caretaker, so I ended up moving back to Maryland to live with them. And I'm so happy that I did, because I got to see him every day, and just to be able to help out and cherish his last memories. But yeah, it was hard to watch that happen. And I was 23 at the time that he passed, and losing someone at a young age. I mean, I would say 23 is still kind of young. And so it's something I still kind of struggle with to this day. But when I was speaking of the anniversaries, like, my dad loved football, and unfortunately he passed on Super Bowl Sunday. And so that's kind of, it's hard every year, which is one of those things, like, we normally would get together and watch the Super Bowl, but like in the back of my head, it's kind of like brings up those old triggers, if you guys kind of feel that way with some dates. And yeah, you kind of just find ways to get through it. And my favorite thing to do, I mentioned before, is to find ways to honor him. So yeah, 4 years, I mean, people say time heals wounds, but I think what Brittany said, you learn to grow. You grow, and then you kind of just figure it out as you go along with life. Mm-hmm. Everyone's trying to figure it out. So
do you ever fall into stages where so like, time doesn't heal necessarily, right, for me? And sometimes for me, it's been 10 years, and there are moments where I don't know if your mind just blocks it out, or you just forget about it. And then when you remember again, or at least for me, I feel guilty that I forgot. Guilty, or guilty that I stopped crying, or, like there comes a time when you talk about this stuff, and you just start crying. You can't control it. The tears just come down. And you get to a point where occasionally you can actually talk about your story without just bawling out.
Mm-hmm. But are you able, so let me ask you, are you able to bring yourself out of that guilt? Once you're there and you realize that you've fallen into that moment, do you think about, well, this isn't what my loved one, like, this isn't how they would want me to be? So you bring yourself back. Like, do you have that?
That's one of the biggest things I struggle with, is not feeling guilty.
Okay.
So like for me, yeah.
The guilt is like, I feel the guilt with feeling happy when they're like around the holidays, making memories without them. I feel guilty for doing that, because I'm like, am I replacing the old memories of when they used to be here? Mm-hmm. And what Brittany just said to you, like, would you want they would want you to be happy. So you have to kind of bring yourself back to, mm-hmm. They would want me to be smiling right now. And it's hard to get out of that sometimes, but it's a constant reminder, I feel like.
It's just such a two-way thing, because like, you want to be happy because you know that they want you to be happy. But then when you're happy, you're like, but I shouldn't be happy because they're not here. How do you get over that?
Well, see, guilt for me is a little different. And I think looking at the seven stages, I think for my family, we all deal with a different stage. And because of that, we aren't able to comfort each other, because everybody's kind of like dealing with their own emotional distress. Like I do have guilt, and I think I've let that part of it go. We lost my uncle almost 4 years ago. September will make 4 years to lung cancer, and it developed so rapidly. Like, he was diagnosed in August and he was gone in September. June, he was diagnosed and he was gone in September. But what I did feel guilty about at one time is he called me. It was a Sunday, or I called him just to check on him, and he was, saying that he wasn't feeling well. His breathing was heavy, and he wasn't. I called to see if he wanted to come down for Sunday dinner, because our family did Sunday dinner every Sunday. So I just called him. I was like, do you need anything? He's like, no, I'm not going to come down. I'm not feeling well. And initially my thought was to go to his house and see him, but I had my son and he didn't like any of the kids to see him like that. So he was like, don't come, I'm fine. And I didn't go. And the next day, I think is when he ended up in the hospital. And me, I have a funny way of blocking out the negative thoughts. So I don't know if he ended up in the hospital that day, because he was in the hospital. He went through radiation. He made it through radiation, started his chemo, and then he went into cardiac arrest and went back into the hospital. So I don't really know where that particular conversation fell, but I just remember that being that Sunday, and I didn't go there. And the next day, something went downhill, and I beat myself up for weeks, because it was like, what if I had gone down there? Could I have got him to the hospital sooner? Could it have been prevented? So first of all, let me applaud you all, because I'm in tears. I'm holding back, but you guys are doing well. So, but my guilt is different from the guilt like my mother and my grandmother have expressed, and they felt, my grandmother has shown anger. My aunts and uncle my aunt was in denial. My uncle was, my other uncle, I want to say he accepted it, but he still kind of fights it. So all of us kind of, because we're at different stages and we experience different feelings, it's hard for us to kind of comfort one another. Instead, like my uncle would have been 50 this year, and me and him, our birthdays are like about a week apart. So it becomes very personal for me. Like May, I'll tend to shut down from the beginning until after his birthday, until I get closer to mine and I'm celebrating mine. Because then at that point, like, they know I'm big on birthdays. So it's like, I know he would be here, he'd be yelling my name, we'd be having a good time. But his birthday, it's like I think Andrea said it, we try to do things like we try to make his favorite dinner. Or because that's our birthday thing in the family. You get your favorite dinner. My grandmother will cook your favorite dinner for the kids, the grandkids. So we still do his dinner. But even in doing those things, somebody disappears at some point because they're having a hard time. Christmas, it takes us a while to all get together because everybody needs that time in the morning to shut down and process it. Thanksgiving, it's all of the holidays. So even here we are almost 4 years later, like, and what happened was he was diagnosed in 2017. My mom was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2015. She went through radiation and had surgery, and she was fine. And then when my mom and my uncle, she's the second oldest and he was the baby. So their relationship was always they all are close, but every once in a while, those two would be the two to butt heads. But when he was diagnosed, they became the closest. Their bond grew. And what I believe is that my mom had to experience what it was like in order to be able, because she was the only person he wanted there. He didn't want my grandmother to have to deal with it. And he knew my mom was the only one strong enough to go through it with him. So my mom was the one that stayed at the hospital for weeks on end, depending on how long they kept him. She took him to every radiation appointment. She was there for every doctor's appointment. So while she was healed pretty quickly, he had to go through a lot more. And unfortunately, it wasn't the cancer that actually, killed him or that took over his body. After his first round of chemo, he went to the hospital for the cardiac arrest. He developed pneumonia, and the pneumonia took over his body. Because of the cancer, his body wasn't strong enough, and the chemo, it had started to break him down or slow him down, and the pneumonia came in and kind of took over everything and shut his organs down. So it's kind of, you look at it and you think about it, and it's like, you look at how things work out, and depending on your spiritual belief. For us, it was like, okay, God allowed my mom to experience it but what she didn't know at the time in 2015 is that her little brother would be going through something similar 2 years later, and that she would have to be the one to step up. So she didn't get a chance to cry. She wasn't able to sit in a hospital and process it. She didn't process it until the day of his funeral, when she had to walk in and see her baby brother laying there. So it was tough. And my grandmother, I don't think she still hasn't processed it, but those two did not see him. My grandmother was the only one awake the night he closed his eyes. When all of us made it, his kids live in Virginia Beach, so we were all at the hospital. And until his kids, he held on until everybody was there. We left. It may have been 9. My grandmother made everybody go home except for the other 3 kids and her. And she said it was about 1 a.m. He everybody was sleeping in the room except her. She said he tried to mumble, and she got up and she told him it was okay. She said, it's okay, you can go. And she said he just closed his eyes. So they had their last moment together. But from that point until the day of the funeral, they did not see him. So for my mother and my grandmother to walk in, it was just like torment to them. It was bad. But so now I think because it took them so long to process, and as close knit as our family is, so much has changed since then. And while we still try to do birthdays and holidays together, we're not together every Sunday anymore. The grandkids are older, so we all have kind of gone our separate ways. We're doing other things, but we all still are in different stages of that grief process, and it makes it hard to be a family of comfort. Although we support each other, we understand that, okay, if Brittany steps out, it's because Brittany has to go and deal with it and process it. Don't bother her, because that's just her thing, however she has to deal with that. Versus, if Granny goes to her room and shuts the door, you don't go behind her and ask questions, because it's Christmas and we know what that means for her. So it's just, it can be tough.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point too, but I keep on saying that everyone's at different stages, and like the best, I mean, there's not a best or a wrong way, but
Right.
you kind of just have to take people for where they're at in their healing process, And so I think it's awesome that you're able to, like, when people need to step away, you understand that and you give them the space to have that space,
Yeah.
But if they want the help, you're there as well. So it's you kind of just have to be there if they need the help, but also don't intervene too much, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's important to understand everybody's, feelings and emotions, and everybody processes differently. So I think that's very important, to just be able to understand that, and not to take over, but just, to your point of guilt. That's why I was asking, like, do you ever, because with like you were saying, you just feel like, I'm not supposed to be happy in this moment. I'm not supposed to be doing this. But then for me, it's like, I think about it, and it's like, I hear him yelling my name, and it's like, get yourself together. This is not where I want you to be. So that's why I asked you.
So do you feel like with everybody being in different stages in your family, does that changes like some traditions in your family, certain things that you actually want, when times when you want to gather, like you really want to gather, but does that ever kind of stop you all from gathering like that? Or do you still gather like usual?
I don't think it stops us. I think sometimes it forces us to be engaging when we'd rather just be alone. Um, and while it may benefit us to be together in that one particular person's mind, I don't want to be here, but I'm going to be here because this is my family and this is what we're doing right now. So yeah.
I think family kind of, since they've gone through the loss with you, they have kind of a way of understanding. But one thing I've learned personally with dealing with grief, I don't think it ever really kind of goes away. And I know I keep on mentioning like birthdays and anniversaries. And like my family, it's been 4.5 years, I guess, for me. So they kind of understand our habits with if we need space or not. But like my dad's past birthday in October, I told my boyfriend at the time, I was like, I just need to be alone. Like, don't talk. Like, I needed the day to myself, and I kind of just hung out with my dog and turned my phone off. And like my friends sent like delivered me donuts and like Uber Eats, you know, like little things like that to say like, hey, thinking of you. But everyone respected like I just wanted to kind of spend the day by myself. And but then for his anniversary in February, you know, I felt different. I wanted to spend it. So like my boyfriend came over and we had dinner together, you know, which is something low key. And so I wanted to have someone around then. So I think you kind of just need to listen to your body and whatever you need at that moment. It's okay, you know. So it changes every year for me. So it's one of those things that for anyone else, if anyone's struggling with it, just kind of give yourself more grace with it.
So Andre, I hear you celebrate both his birthday and the day he passed. On and David, do you guys celebrate? Because like the day that the person passed, does it kind of haunt you, or do you actually celebrate in that moment?
Well, for me, we do not celebrate because my daughter lost her youngest daughter on her birthday. So we do the happy birthday thing, but we don't have a big celebration. We replace it a bit with again the joy of my great granddaughters. Or you had mentioned it when family gets together. Even sometimes you may not want to get together with the family, but it has a healing aspect of it. So sometimes I might be in my room because I'm sulking, but if I know that the family has come over and then I go down and have to be with them, it inevitably turns into, you know, a happy occasion and we're happy we got together. Yeah, but that's one of the challenges that we do not act. It's hard to celebrate that day. It's just hard.
What about you?
Actually, I don't feel like I celebrate. I feel like I kind of do something little to honor, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yes, and I guess celebrate, and I thought about it as David was saying the word celebrate, but I mean, like for us, we don't use the word funeral in our family. It's celebration of life. So even the homegoing service is a celebration of life for us. So, but on that particular day, like we don't even talk about it. We don't. His kids acknowledge it, I think, but we just kind of shy away from it because that day was just actually like me, I shut down for an entire month and don't realize it. I did it last year and didn't realize it until the end of September what was wrong with me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, for me, traditionally in our culture, we, I guess, celebrate like death anniversaries. But for me personally, I mean, I help my mom like do the celebrations, the traditional things that we're supposed to do. Certain like they cook and everything like that. But for me personally, and my grandma's death anniversary, I go back into denial mode. Like this didn't happen because I wasn't there. So, so my story is about my grandmother. She's the very first person. So when we first came to, like, I wasn't born in the US. So when we first came to America, it was just my mom, my dad, and my grandmother. So the four of us. So she's extremely close to me.
It's okay.
Thought I could make it. She's the first like real death like that of somebody really close to me. So I don't really know how to react part. I don't know. Like my dad's dad passed away when I was a lot younger, but I never react to it because I didn't know him. I didn't remember him. But this woman, she helped raise me. So when we first found out that she had ovarian cancer, it hit me super hard. All through college was just like, whatever, I'm here just to graduate and get that diploma and be done with it. That's literally how my college days were. I didn't care. Honestly, I just wanted to get that diploma and get out of there. And we had to send my grandma to Vietnam because my uncle has the ability, he's wealthy, he has the ability to, you know, help her with the radiation, help hire like a private nurse to take care of her. So when she went back to Vietnam for treatment, I didn't get to see her. But it was a really big blessing because the doctors in the US, they told us that with my grandma's stage 4 ovarian cancer, there was nothing they can do with it. And pretty much I mean, obviously they're not going to tell you how long she can live, but it wasn't long. But thankfully, when my grandmother went to Vietnam, my uncle was able to get her really good treatment. And so she actually ended up living like almost 2 years longer than expected, which was pretty much amazing. And we thought that she actually was able to come back to the US for a short time because we thought that that cancer went away. She had a lot of surgeries. They removed her, you know, ovaries and everything like that. And she was pretty cleared. She came back to the US. It was amazing. Like, I don't usually have a very strong like belief, but my grandmother is very strong. Like, she's very strong Buddhism. And when she was sick, I came across this I searched something and I came across this thing about origami, and it talks about like cranes. So cranes are supposed to help like bring hope to you. And there's a saying that 1,000 cranes can grant you one wish. So I remember when I first found out she was sick that I made a promise to myself that I would make 2,000 paper cranes. These right here. 2,000 paper cranes. I wanted to make 2,000 paper cranes because my only wish was for her to live. And when she survived that extra 2 years, that was a blessing, you know. And the month that we found out that I was about 6 or 7 months pregnant with Nathan. So I couldn't fly back to Vietnam to see her. I wanted to really bad. And the reason why it affects me so much, because I feel like I could have seen her. And they kept saying, no, don't go. My doctors cleared it. I was like, yes, I can go. And I wish I fought it. You know, I wish I had just gone because I didn't know that was the last time I could see her. And I asked my sister when she went, you know, take your laptop. I want to be able to see her. I want to be able to like FaceTime with her or something. And that didn't happen. And sometimes I do blame my sister, which I feel bad because, you know, it's not her fault because I could have gone. And when she passed away, my mom tried to hide it from me, actually. She flew back to Vietnam. It was just like a trip that she was planning on going anyways to see my grandmother. But I had, you know, when you get that gut feeling that something is wrong. And that morning, my mom flew out and I called my aunt. I was like, hey, what's going on? And I just, somehow she slipped and told me my grandma passed away. And I just,
oh, wow.
I just bawled out crying because I never spoke to her. I think it was like at least a week and a half before she passed away. I didn't call her. And I used to call her every day or at least a couple times a week. And I stopped calling her. And you know why? I stopped calling her because the last couple of weeks, she kept nagging about how, oh, you guys don't love me. You sent me to Vietnam. No one wants me. And so I didn't call her. And I didn't realize that by not calling her, I wouldn't have been able to hear her for the last time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's easy for me to be in denial because I never got to see her. I haven't gone back to see her grave. And quite frankly, a part of me doesn't, I guess, want to, because I feel like if I don't go, then maybe she's still alive somewhere.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the denial part in me. But I carry a lot of guilt.
Mm.
So do any of you all ever go back to visit your loved one's gravesite or burial?
My dad was cremated, so there's not a grave site for me to go back to. But I don't know. I think it's something that people struggle with to do.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
You?
do. I struggle. I've lost, I lost my mom. I lost the grandkids, nieces. But I've never gone to see my mother's grave. I lost her in 2016. I haven't seen any of the graves for even my grandfather was my hero. I have not gone to see his grave.
Yeah.
Never seen it. Grandmother has not seen her grave. None of my grandparents. I go to the cemetery if my wife is going to put flowers on her dad's grave. That's the only time.
Yeah, my dad, I've lost both of my grandparents on my dad's side. Um, and my grandmother, I give my grandmother credit because Memorial Day, birthday, she does go and update the graves with the flowers and everything. But I just, and that's why I asked, because I thought it was just me, but I just don't. To go back is, I think that's a tough place to
Mm-hmm.
be, just to bring you back to that moment, to that thought, that feeling.
Yeah.
To be standing there, it kind of puts you back into that day, and to you deal with it enough just with your feelings, thoughts, and emotions. So the physical of having to relive that moment is kind of hard.
My wife, she always, ever since we've been together, my wife has always said, celebrate people while they're alive.
Mm-hmm.
So, Brittany, you call me sunshine and rainbows. That may be because of what my wife says. I try to celebrate people while they're alive. Again, it's the thing of feeding. I don't want to feed grief. I don't want to feed mourning. I want to feed the joy. So I celebrate things people have done while I know them walking this earth,
Do
and
you,
I keep that in my memory.
do you feel like, though, sometimes I wonder, like, if going to her grave would bring me that closure that I need?
It's possible, but do you also take into consideration that maybe did your grandmother, when the last time you spoke with her, did it sound like she was in pain or struggling at all?
No.
So do you ever take into consideration like that's how you were intended to remember her, just sounding like herself, even though she was fussing? Because and I laugh because my grandmother fusses at me all the time and I get frustrated. I'm like, okay, I don't want to talk anymore. But because that's our relationship and those are things we can laugh at when we get over it, it's like, you know, maybe that's how you were supposed to remember her, just having a normal conversation or her nagging or bugging. I'm not sure the word you use, but just her being a grandmother. That was supposed to be, your cherished memory instead of seeing her, in an unfortunate state or after she had passed away.
What makes me the saddest is, like, my aunt had told me before, when after she had passed away, my grandmother was hanging on to wait to see the birth of my son, because she literally passed away a month, maybe less than a month before my son was born.
Mm.
So to bring that to the surface, my son's great grandmother, she passed. So I sat through her funeral and went into labor that night.
Oh my goodness.
So the thought, and that's on his dad's side. So I didn't have a relationship with her, but the thought there is that in my mind, they never met, but possibly they met in passing as she's ascending, in our cultural belief is she's ascending into heaven and he's come, he's being sent from heaven to earth, in his human form. So it's like, okay, for all I know, they did meet. It just wasn't in this physical realm where I can see it. But that was her gift to us, was sending Carter. So possible that your grandmother and your son had some connection. I know cultures are different and beliefs are different, but it's possible that they had some connection. And while you may not feel that way, I had to accept that for him and for his dad, because his dad had a really hard time. Just that whole day was, because Carter came 7 weeks early. So it was like, I wasn't even supposed to have been in labor that day, but I delivered her funeral. I sat through her funeral at by 9 o'clock. I was contracting. 9 o'clock p.m. I was contracting, and I had Carter 2 a.m. the next morning. So something happened, and the doctors even questioned, are you sure you're this far along? And I'm like, this is out of, I'm not the professional, it's out of my hands. So it's possible that they, there was some spiritual connection with your grandmother and your son. I mean, and those are all things I think we have to, think about. And again, it's different cultural beliefs, but when you talk to friends and associates from those different cultures, you start to have those conversations, and you can look at things in different perspectives. And for me, it's helped.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
Did any one of you ever kind of lose faith? Like for me, when my grandma passed away, I completely shut down. I lost faith in everything because my grandmother was so religious. She would go to the temple all the time, and I used to go with her all the time. And when she passed, I just kind of shut down, was like, she used to be so religious and everything, and then look what happened. She's gone. You took her away from me. I completely shut down. Like I was just like, nope, I believe in nothing.
And that's the challenge. We tend to do that. Because like Brittany says, I'm Christian. In our religion, too many people say God took something from them. But everything we read says God is not, he's for us. The devil is the destroyer. So it's not God that took anything from us. So yeah, it is hard though. Faith is one of the things, the first thing that you can lose when that happens. You say, why did you let this happen? And for me, it's when it goes in that direction, I'll listen to different kind of worship songs, read certain things just to keep my eyes on my God, and know that he did not take the person away from me. The devil is our destroyer.
See, but I understand that now. And what's hard is like I actually lost a good friend through that stage when I lost my grandmother and I lost like faith in everything. I lost a friend because I lost faith. Like I wrote something about not believing in anything anymore, and I lost a friend. And I just want to say that if you go through that stage, it's okay. Allow yourself to go through that stage, and you'll work your way out. And if you know somebody does go through that stage, support them. Don't leave them.
But and to David's point, in the Christian belief, I also believe that in your hardest times is when God shows you who is supposed to be in your life. So while you may have considered that person a friend, maybe they weren't meant to be your friend all along. And because you were going, it took for you to go experience that pain for you, that you can look at it as, for in Christian, God stepped in and said, I'm going to remove the people who don't support you, because what if that person had been there, had stayed along and somehow stabbed you in the back, or, I say that for lack of a better term, but further down the road in a different scenario. So maybe it was best that they weeded themselves out at that point. Because, again, in the Christian, as a Christian, we're taught to love as God loves us. So that means even when you see somebody going, you understand their position, you understand that something like that can break a person down, and that means you have to love them a little harder, a little closer, but also give them that space to deal and process, because they're going to go through those thoughts and feelings and emotions. And it's so easy to lose faith in different moments and different happenings, because it's like you said, I thought, God, you weren't supposed to let this happen. We get to fault and blame, and we get to, pointing fingers, and it's nobody's fault. It's just that we are trying to deal and process, and at that very moment, we can't. We're in the moment, and it's hard. So, I mean, look at it that I always tell people, look at that as a blessing. That person wasn't even supposed to be a part of your life. They made it that far, but people show their true colors in the toughest of situations. So,
yeah, that's one saying that I always remember, is that living in this world is a full contact sport. So our faith guides us through it. If we lose that faith, we become subject to more of the abuse of this world.
yeah.
So how long did it take for you guys to actually be able to talk about this? Like, I thought that I would be able to talk about it without, crying, which obviously didn't happen. So 10 years clearly wasn't enough time.
For me, I held back my tears today. But to talk, I mean, my uncle, him and I were only 16 years apart. So that was like losing a big brother for me. I've lost grandparents, I've lost great grandparents, and I've been old enough to understand when I lost them. But losing him, I still don't like to talk about it. I still don't certain things. So I'm not there yet. I can't answer it, because even going on 4 years, I haven't reached that point. I'm still in tears. The memories still pop up. And then even Carter, he's going to turn 7. So he was about 3 or 4. He remembers. So he talks about my uncle a lot. And even just to hear him, a lot of times he'll ask me questions and I'll just shut down. And being 6 now, he's not thinking like mommy's having a hard time talking about this, because she's still trying to process it. I don't even go to my uncle's house. My great uncle lives there. I don't even go. I go maybe once or twice a year. My uncle always fusses at me. You don't call, you don't come by. It's not somewhere I want to go. It's too many memories there. It's too much of a reminder. So yeah, I don't know about Andre and David, but for me, I'm not there.
Yeah, I've been around a long time. Time is not something that, to me, allows you to forget. I have an aunt. She passed away in the 60s, and it's almost every year I'm thinking about her. So yeah, that's a long time ago, and those thoughts don't go away with time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I'm at the point in my life where I'm definitely more at the acceptance stage with it. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's days that I have where the grief hits a completely different way out of nowhere and I'm just a wreck. But I kind of feel like, I haven't said this story yet, but tying back to when my dad was sick, when we first got it, like when he was first really bad, I remember I was praying, like, please don't take him, God. Like, I need my daddy. I need him for all this stuff in my life, And then the more and more I was around him when I lived back at home, I saw the sickness just taking over. And I started shifting to just praying to heal him, like get him to be where, like, if it's supposed to be heaven, I trust that that's the plan, And so I kind of almost was grieving him while he was still here, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of going through those stages. But so he had a trach-in, and so he was communicating with us with a pen and paper. And the day before he passed, well, that Friday, I was taking the metro back to my parents' house, so I was living there. And I had this huge sense of just hugs, like, that I knew everything was going to be okay. And it was the most surreal feeling. I've never felt that before. And so since my dad couldn't eat the feeding tube and trach, my mom and I went out to dinner that night, I told her, I was like, I just feel everything's, I don't know how to explain this feeling, but things are gonna be fine, And then that Saturday, my mom was out doing stuff, and my dad and I were sitting on the couch talking. He was writing, and he would like snap his fingers, and he was like, "Hey." And so he wrote down, he's like, "How are you? Are you going to be okay?" And I was like, "I'm fine." Like, yeah, things are fine. I think maybe I was talking about like friend stuff or something random, but he wanted to make sure, he's like, "No, I want to make like, you're okay." And so I think a lot of people don't have that kind of goodbye in a way, but having that was my last conversation with him. And I think that's what kind of gave me the acceptance, is because I feel like in my heart, I knew he was ready to go and he knew what was happening. And so I'm getting chills speaking about it right now, but that's how I choose to look at it. And so I feel like I'm at this point where I can talk more about him with more of a smile on my face, because I feel more peace with it. Like I said before, don't get me wrong, there are bad days, but I choose to accept kind of the reality of what happened. But then again, my sister, she was in shock when he passed. So it's the same situation, different points in the spectrum or in the stage. So yeah.
I still go back and forth, but I continue to sit in denial stage. And then I think about like certain things, like, when I told you guys I was making like 2,000 cranes, I started to feel guilty because I realized that when she got better, I was so excited. I made a jar with 1,000 paper cranes, and when she got better, I guess it just kind of slipped my mind and I never finished. This is literally a quarter of the 1,000 cranes that I should have finished, like the extra 1,000. And I felt kind of guilty, like maybe she passed because I didn't finish it. Like, it's supposed to grant you one wish, but you didn't even finish the cranes.
Have you ever or any of you, have you ever considered counseling or gone through counseling for these deaths in your family? You did, Andrea?
Yeah, I started when my dad was sick, and I still see the same person, just kind of to talk about just things. And I think I feel incredibly grateful that I because my roommate at the time, she lost her boyfriend, and so she kind of was like, I talked to someone after it, and I think you witnessing your dad being sick, it might help. And I think it's something people don't talk about enough, but for me, I needed a push to do it because I wouldn't have gone on my own. So
do you feel like it helped you though?
Yeah, just kind of having a safe place to talk about it. Yeah,
I think it's hard for most people to be like, it's not something that comes to your mind when these things happen. Like, oh, I'm gonna go see a counselor. It's just not something that we think of. So I'm glad that your friend kind of helped you, go to it. Like, for instance, at PBGC, for example, we have those free sessions, those 6 free sessions. Most agencies, I think, probably have something like that. The free sessions with the
it's actually EAP, is your Employee Assistance Program. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, all federal employees are entitled to those services.
I think so.
Yeah.
But that's a resource right there that some people don't think about.
Yes. And I what I do know is that even through EAP, if once your free sessions are up, you can get a referral from that particular counselor if they or you feel like you need to continue outside, based on what your insurance will allow. So it is a great resource, and the HR department can help you. They offer financial assistance, counseling. They offer a few different types of assistance. So it is a great resource that I think people should reach out to. I know they're always at our HR fairs, so I've talked to them.
I know, like, just talking just to you guys, I feel a lot better. It was like building up, and then after the tears come out, you just kind of like, whew, okay, I'm good.
But we're not going to do this again, are we?
No more, please, no more. But I hope, what I do hope is that, because I know you guys kind of helped me, like Ann said, to talk about it. It helps to tell somebody who hasn't heard the story or who wasn't there. So I hope that in us talking about it, it will encourage others to talk about it, or to even go and see, possibly go to a counselor, even if it's been 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Sometimes sometimes we think we need to go for what's happening in the moment, but when you get there, you realize you unpack a lot of what's happened in the past, and it'll bring you to the present. And in talking about the past, you kind of start to piece the puzzle together and realize that what I'm going through now in the present has a lot to do with what I haven't dealt with in my past. So
it goes back to what my wife says, just tell the person how you feel, celebrate them while they're alive, tell them how you feel. Don't hold those grudges.
Yep.
Because oftentimes that's what can resurface when something bad happens. You're thinking of what you could have said, what you could have done.
Yep. Yeah. All the what ifs, like what if, if I could have said I love you to my grandma one last time. What if I could have said my goodbyes, Well,
I love you all. I love you all.
Yes, Mr. Sunshine and Rainbows, we appreciate and love you for always being optimistic.
Rainbows, I promise there's a rainbow right outside right now. When I told you I had the chills, I literally saw a rainbow, and it's still out there. Wow.
But you see, everybody goes through grief and coping so differently. We're all in different
stages. Be patient with yourself,
Yep. And allow yourself to feel these things. Allow yourself to cry if you need to. If you don't want to talk to anybody, don't talk to anybody. Journal. Find your own personal outlet.
Yes, because it can and it will consume and overwhelm you if you do not. And, again, going back to what's happening within our world today, so many people are overstressing or being overwhelmed to a point of suicide and domestic violence and, hurting others simply because they're hurt or they're not coping or they're not dealing. And it just, then the numbers just increase in unfortunate circumstances when there are so many opportunities to heal, to grow, to cope, and understand where you are and why you're there. So I highly encourage, like Ann said, deal with it, process it, take the time.
But be patient.
Talk with others. Yeah.
Yeah.
And hopefully all of us, by sharing our stories, it kind of helps whoever's listening realize grief looks different on everyone. We all have very different stories, but we all kind of feel each other's pain in a way. So as long as this podcast helps one person, I'm happy that we shared our story.
I mean, this is like the deepest, dirtiest story of mine. Like, you can't get to know me any more than me crying on the video, like.
Yeah.
So that means it can only get fun from here, guys.
Don't plan any more tears.
I'm glad this isn't our kickoff podcast.
Right.
That's a crazy way to start.
So that means after we cope, we have fun. So everybody has to join us for the next session, the next podcast episode, because it's going to be lots and lots of fun.
Yes.
Really, just remember, give yourself grace. And that's something that I also need to listen to myself, because I don't. But
yes, give yourself grace.
Yes.
Yes, Ann, I can say you are definitely driven. So give yourself time, give yourself grace.
And be patient.
Yes.
Okay, so enough with all the tears. Let's make this a little fun to wrap it up. What's the weirdest or most fun experience you've had this week, David?
Oh, for me, this morning, about 7:30, my granddaughter, I came down the stairs and she said, "Granddaddy, Auntie had a bird in her room this morning." I said, "What?" I said, "Well, did she feed it?" Yeah, she left her window open and she had a bird flapping around in the room.
Oh, wow. And how'd the bird get out? How long did it take to chase it out?
My son-in-law grabbed it and put it outside.
Wow.
Okay.
Who's
next?
What about you, Andrea?
So my mom's retiring next week, actually, sorry.
Oh, wow.
But so we went out to dinner to kind of celebrate a little bit last night, and we're in Norfolk, Virginia, which is about 4 hours from where I grew up. And our server, we were looking at the menu, and my mom was like, "I wonder how the crab cakes are." I was like, you should ask the server because you should say I'm from Maryland. The crab is better be good, or should I not even try it? So she asked the server, and he goes, "Oh, you're from Maryland? What part?" And we're like, "Howard County." And he goes, "I'm from Howard County." Turns out he went to the high school near me, graduated a year before me, ended up knowing the same people. So small world. Love when things like that happen.
Those were almost fighting words to say something about the crab cake.
Or crab cakes and football. That's what Maryland does.
Is it my turn?
Yes, Brittany.
Yeah.
I don't even think I know what weird and interesting is anymore because I have a 6-year-old. So every day is weird or interesting. A 6-year-old boy. Sorry. But for this week, I'm sure it's something Carter has said. Interesting and fun or funny. He has a piano now.
Really?
Ooh, I want to get one for my kids. Is it a bad idea? No, don't do it.
The piano came with a microphone.
Okay.
So all day while I'm in meetings, you have Carter in the background singing his Sunny Day song.
So are you saying don't do this? Should I not?
No, I wish you the best because I'm texting my mom from my office like, can you please tell him to stop screaming, stop using the microphone, stop playing. And then he'll play the piano, but then he'll play like the pre-recorded tunes in there, and he's just singing to the beat, and I'm just like, oh my God.
Next podcast, can he be a guest and do our closeout by him singing?
No. So yeah, that's my fun, interesting fact for this week so far.
Or for me, I got yelled at by my mailman because, well, I kind of suck at opening my mail, and I guess it was, full. So he was like, "Yeah, you need to check your mailbox because you never do it." And I'm like, "Sorry." I really wanted to be like, if you stop sending me junk mail, I might open it more often. So I'm one of those. Sorry, my bad.
That's a good one. Who gets yelled at by the mail person?
Anyway, check us back out again in a few minutes. We'll have a new segment next month. So I hope you enjoyed this one.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.